They poured ice-cold champagne over a 62-year-old woman's head while she knelt on marble floors, shielding a German shepherd from their kicks. They filmed it. They laughed. They called her invisible trash and posted it online for the world to mock. They had money. They had power. They had police protection. What they didn't have was any idea that her son had spent 15 years making men like them disappear in places the world pretended didn't exist. And he was about to come home. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe and follow this story to the very end. You won't believe what happens next. The champagne hit Dorothy Cole before she heard the laughter. Ice-cold liquid exploded against the back of her neck, soaked through her gray uniform, dripped down her spine like a cruel winter river. She gasped, stumbled forward, and her knees cracked against the marble floor of the Ocean View Country Club's terrace. "Bullseye!" A man's voice rang out behind her, young, arrogant, delighted. Dorothy's hand shot out instinctively, not to catch herself, but to shield the German shepherd pressed against her cleaning cart. Shadow. Her son's dog, the only piece of Marcus she had left since he deployed 8 months ago. "Did you see her face?" Another voice, female, giggling. "She looked like a drowned rat." Dorothy didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around. Her fingers trembled as champagne dripped from her silver hair into her eyes, burning, blinding. She was 62 years old. She had worked at this club for 8 years. She had never spoken back to a member, never complained, never asked for anything except to be left alone to do her job. Shadow pressed his warm body against her side, his brown eyes locked on the figures behind them. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Mom, it's okay," Dorothy whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop it. She'd called him that since Marcus sent him home. It felt right. It felt like having family again. "Stay calm. Stay with me." "Oh my God, she's talking to the dog!" The male voice again, closer now. "Preston, get this on video. This is gold." Preston Ashford III stepped into Dorothy's peripheral vision, his phone raised, his smile wide and empty. He was 27 years old, tall, athletic, with the kind of golden tan that came from yacht decks and tennis courts. His white polo shirt probably cost more than Dorothy's monthly rent. His watch definitely did. "Say hi to the internet cleaning lady," Preston said, circling her like a shark. "You're about to be famous." Dorothy pushed herself up slowly, one hand still on Shadow's collar. Her knees screamed. Her back ached. But she stood. She always stood. 20 years of marriage to a man who drank too much had taught her how to stand when everything inside her wanted to collapse. I'll move along now, sir," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Preston's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Disturb us? You?" He looked back at his friends. 3 men in designer clothes, 2 women in bikinis and sarongs, all of them holding phones, all of them recording. "Did she disturb us?" "Absolutely," one of the women said, pouting dramatically. "She ruined my whole poolside vibe." "See?" Preston turned back to Dorothy. "You ruined her vibe. What are you going to do about that?" Dorothy's grip tightened on Shadow's collar. The dog's growl intensified. She could feel his muscles coiling, his training kicking in. Marcus had warned her about this. Shadow spent 4 years in Afghanistan detecting IEDs. He'd saved countless lives. But he was also trained to protect. And right now, every instinct in his body was telling him that his handler's mother was in danger. "Easy, boy," Dorothy murmured. "Easy." "Is that thing even allowed in here?" Preston's friend stepped forward. Kyle, his name was, Dorothy remembered from cleaning up after his parties. Kyle Mercer. Old money. Meaner than Preston, if that was possible. I'm pretty sure dogs aren't allowed in the member areas. He's a service dog, Dorothy said softly. A retired military, he's a mutt. Kyle's foot shot out, catching Shadow in the ribs. The dog yelped. Dorothy screamed, "No!" She threw herself over Shadow, covering him with her body, champagne-soaked uniform and all. Kyle's second kick landed on her shoulder instead of the dog. Pain exploded through her arm, but she didn't move. Couldn't move. Marcus trusted her with Shadow. Marcus sent his dog home because he believed she would keep him safe. "Please," Dorothy gasped, tears mixing with champagne on her cheeks. "Please, he didn't do anything. He's just an old dog. Please." Preston laughed. Actually laughed. "This is amazing. Kyle, kick her again. This is going viral for sure." "Preston." A new voice cut through the chaos. Smooth, controlled, professional. "Perhaps we should take this somewhere less public." Vincent Marsh appeared beside the group, his black blazer perfectly pressed, his smile perfectly practiced. The club manager. Dorothy had worked under him for 8 years. He'd never learned her name. "Vinny!" Preston clapped Vincent on the shoulder like they were old friends. "Just having a little fun with the help. No harm done, right?" Vincent's eyes flickered to Dorothy, still curled protectively over Shadow on the ground. Champagne pooled beneath her. Her uniform was ruined. Her dignity was shattered. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, Dorothy thought she saw something like hesitation in his face. Then it was gone. "Of course, Mr. Ashford," Vincent said smoothly. "I'll handle this immediately." He reached down and grabbed Dorothy's arm, pulling her roughly to her feet. Shadow barked, lunged forward, but Dorothy held him back. "No, Shadow, down." The dog obeyed, but his eyes never left Vincent's throat. "You're causing a disturbance," Vincent hissed in Dorothy's ear, dragging her away from the pool area. "Do you have any idea who that is? That's Preston Ashford. His father owns this club. His father owns half this town." "He poured champagne on me," Dorothy whispered. "His friend kicked my dog. They kicked me." "Then you should have moved faster." They reached the service corridor, the one hidden behind the decorative hedges so members wouldn't have to see the staff coming and going. Vincent released Dorothy's arm with a shove that sent her stumbling against the wall. "You're suspended," he said flatly. "Effective immediately." Dorothy's blood ran cold. "What? But I didn't—" "You brought an unauthorized animal onto club property. You disturbed premium members during their leisure time. You caused a scene that could damage our reputation." "They filmed it," Dorothy's voice cracked. "They posted it online. I don't care what they did." Vincent stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "They pay. You clean. That's the arrangement. That's always been the arrangement. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you don't belong here at all." Dorothy's hand moved instinctively toward her pocket, toward her phone. Marcus. She needed to call Marcus. He would know what to do. He always knew what to do. Vincent's hand shot out, snatching the phone from her fingers before she could react. "Who are you going to call?" he sneered. "Your lawyer? You can't afford a lawyer. The police? Chief Holt plays golf with Preston's father every Sunday." He turned the phone over in his hands, examining it like it was evidence of a crime. "Let me guess. Your son? The one you're always bragging about? What is he? A mechanic? A plumber?" Dorothy lifted her chin. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "He's a Navy SEAL." For a moment, just one brief, beautiful moment, Vincent's smug expression flickered. Something cold passed behind his eyes. Fear? Doubt? Dorothy couldn't tell. Then he laughed. "Sure he is." Vincent's thumb pressed down. The phone screen cracked. He dropped it on the concrete floor, then crushed it under his heel. "There. Problem solved. No more calls. He straightened his blazer, smoothing invisible wrinkles. "You have 1 hour to collect your things and leave the property. If you're not gone by then, I'll have security escort you out." "And Dorothy?" He smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Don't bother applying anywhere else in town. The Ashfords have a very long reach." He walked away without looking back. Dorothy stood alone in the service corridor, champagne drying stiff on her skin, her shattered phone at her feet, her world crumbling around her. Shadow pressed against her leg, whimpering softly. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, her hand finding his head automatically. "It's okay. We're okay." But she wasn't okay, and they both knew it. 200 miles away, at Naval Station Norfolk, Marcus Cole stood in his commanding officer's office with his deployment bag at his feet and a question in his eyes. "You're sure about this, Cole?" Captain Williams leaned back in his chair, studying the man who had been one of his best operators for 15 years. 3 days early release is unusual. If something happens... "Nothing's going to happen, sir." Marcus's voice was calm, steady, the same voice he used when giving orders in hostile territory. "My team's rotating out. The mission's complete. I just want to surprise my mother. That's all." Williams nodded slowly. Marcus Cole wasn't the type to ask for favors. In 15 years, the man had never taken a personal day, never complained about deployment length, never asked for special treatment. He was the kind of SEAL that commands bragged about and enemies had nightmares about. "All right," Williams said finally. 3 days early. But Cole, stay out of trouble. I know how you get when you're bored." Marcus's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I'll be on my best behavior, sir." He was reaching for his bag when his phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. Marcus frowned, pulling it from his pocket. His notifications were exploding. 17 new messages. 8 missed calls. A dozen tags on social media platforms he barely used. "Cole?" Williams' voice sharpened. "What is it?" Marcus opened the first message. A video link from a former teammate. The message above it read, "Isn't this your mom?" The blood drained from Marcus's face as he pressed play. He watched a woman in a gray uniform kneel on marble floors, shielding a German shepherd with her body. He watched champagne pour over her silver hair. He watched a man in an expensive polo shirt laugh and circle her like prey. He watched another man kick his dog. He watched his mother fall. He watched his mother beg. The video was only 47 seconds long. By the time it ended, Marcus's phone had cracked in his grip. He hadn't even realized he was squeezing it. "Cole!" Williams was on his feet now, moving around the desk. "Talk to me. What's happening?" Marcus looked up. His eyes had changed. Williams had seen that look before. In Afghanistan, in Syria, in places that didn't officially exist. It was the look Marcus got before an operation, before people who deserved it stopped breathing. "Permission to leave immediately, sir," Marcus said. His voice was too calm, too controlled. "I need to go home." Williams didn't argue. "Granted. But Cole..." Marcus was already gone. Dorothy was still standing in the service corridor when the security guard found her. "Ma'am?" Young guy, couldn't be more than 25. His name tag read Eddie. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Marsh said you need to leave. I'm supposed to escort you to the employee lot." Dorothy nodded numbly. "I just need to get my things from my locker." "I'll walk with you." They moved through the back hallways of the club, past the laundry rooms and kitchen prep areas, past the break room where Dorothy had eaten lunch alone for 8 years. Eddie kept glancing at her like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, as they reached the locker room, he spoke. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "What they did to you. It wasn't right. Dorothy paused, her hand on the locker door. You saw it? Everyone's seen it. It's everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Eddie's jaw tightened. Preston Ashford tagged the club's account, said... He stopped, swallowed. Never mind what he said. Tell me. Eddie hesitated. Then, he said it was the funniest thing he'd seen all summer. Called it putting the help in their place. Dorothy's fingers trembled as she opened her locker. Inside, a change of clothes she'd never need now. A photo of Marcus in his dress uniform. A bag of treats for Shadow. Ma'am? Eddie again, softer this time. I know it's not my place, but do you have somewhere to go? Someone who can help? Dorothy touched the photo of Marcus, 35 years old, her only child. The boy who used to pick dandelions for her birthday, and now spent his life in places she couldn't imagine, doing things she couldn't ask about. She'd told him she was fine. She'd told him not to worry. She'd lied so he could focus on staying alive. My son, she said finally. He's overseas. Military. Eddie's expression shifted. He's deployed? Yes. Then he probably hasn't seen... Eddie trailed off. The implication hung between them like smoke. But Dorothy knew. Somehow, she knew. Marcus would see the video. Marcus would come home. And when he did... Ma'am? Eddie touched her arm gently. We really need to go. Dorothy nodded. She gathered her meager belongings, clipped Shadow's leash to his collar, and followed Eddie out into the blazing July sun. The employee parking lot was almost empty. Her car, a 15-year-old Honda with rust spots and a passenger window that didn't roll down, sat alone near the back fence. Dorothy walked toward it slowly, each step heavier than the last. 8 years. 8 years of early mornings and late nights, of scrubbing toilets and wiping up spilled champagne, of being invisible to people who wouldn't survive a day in her shoes. She'd done everything right. Everything. And still, they broke her. She was fumbling with her keys when the black SUV pulled into the lot. Dorothy froze. Shadow's ears flattened. The dog's entire body tensed, and that low growl returned to his chest. The SUV's doors opened. 3 men stepped out. They weren't security guards. They were wearing expensive suits, the kind lawyers wore, but they didn't move like lawyers. They moved like men who were used to intimidating people. Dorothy Cole? The leader stepped forward. Middle-aged, gray hair, cold eyes. We need to have a conversation. Dorothy's hand tightened on Shadow's leash. Who are you? My name is Leonard Ashford, the man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I believe you've met my son. Marcus drove through the night. He'd rented a truck at Norfolk, something nondescript, something that wouldn't attract attention. His deployment bag was in the back seat. His mind was 200 miles ahead, in the small coastal town where his mother had spent the last decade rebuilding her life after his father's death. The video played on loop in his head. He'd watched it 17 times. He'd memorized every face, every voice, every detail. Preston Ashford III. Marcus had already pulled the name from social media tags and news archive searches. Son of Leonard Ashford, CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals. 27 years old, Harvard dropout. 3 sealed court records that suggested assault charges that never went to trial. Net worth estimated at $400 million. Kyle Mercer. Old money from Connecticut. Trust fund. 2 ex-wives, both with non-disclosure agreements. Vincent Marsh. Club manager. 12 years at Ocean View. 14 complaints of member misconduct buried in his tenure. 0 disciplinary actions against premium members. Marcus had spent 15 years hunting men in the shadows of the world. Drug lords in Colombia, terrorist cells in Syria, warlords in sub-Saharan Africa. He knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. He knew how to make people who thought they were untouchable understand exactly how touchable they were. But this was different. This was personal. His phone rang at 3 a.m. Unknown number. Marcus answered anyway. Call. A familiar voice. Jake Reeves, his former teammate, now working for a major news network. I saw the video. Tell me you're not doing anything stupid. Define stupid. Marcus. Jake's voice hardened. I know that tone. I've heard that tone before. Remember Fallujah? Remember what happened when this is different? It's always different, until it's not. A pause, a sigh. What do you need? Marcus stared at the dark highway stretching ahead of him. Information. Everything you can find on the Ashford family. Business dealings, political connections, skeletons. That's a big ask. These people are connected, like really connected. I know. Their money has money, Marcus. They've got judges in their pockets, police chiefs, maybe even a congressman or two. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. You're going to tear them apart, aren't you? Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. No, he said quietly. I'm going to make them tear themselves apart. I just need to show the world who they really are. He hung up before Jake could respond. Leonard Ashford stood 3 feet from Dorothy Cole, and the air between them felt like ice. My son made a mistake, Leonard said, his voice smooth as polished stone. He's young, impulsive. I'm sure you understand. Dorothy didn't understand, couldn't understand. Her shoulders still throbbed where Kyle's kick had landed. Her uniform was still stiff with dried champagne. And this man who owned half the town, who employed half the people she knew, who could destroy her with a phone call, was standing in front of her, acting like his son had merely spilled a glass of water. He assaulted me, Dorothy said, and her voice didn't shake. She was surprised by that. His friend kicked my dog. They filmed it and put it online for people to laugh at. An unfortunate misunderstanding. Leonard's smile remained fixed. Boys will be boys. Your son is 27 years old. And you're a janitor. The smile vanished. Leonard's eyes hardened, and Dorothy saw the predator beneath the polished exterior. Let me be very clear, Mrs. Cole. This video will disappear. The posts will be deleted. Anyone who shared them will be encouraged to remove them. By tomorrow morning, this entire incident will be nothing but a fading memory. Dorothy's heart hammered in her chest. And what do you want from me? Your silence. Leonard reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. There's $50,000 in here. More than 2 years of your salary, if I'm not mistaken. Take it. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we never speak of this again. $50,000. Dorothy's mind reeled. That was enough to pay off her car, fix her leaky roof, maybe even put a little aside for what? For the next time some rich man's son decided she was entertainment? No. The word came out before Dorothy could stop it. And once it was out, she found she didn't want to take it back. Leonard's expression flickered. I'm sorry? I said no. Dorothy straightened her spine, even though everything in her screamed to back down, to take the money, to disappear. Your son humiliated me. His friend kicked a dog that served this country for 4 years. And you think $50,000 makes that okay? I think $50,000 is more than generous. Leonard's voice dropped. Dangerous now. I think you should take what's being offered, Mrs. Cole, because the alternative is unpleasant. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Leonard stepped closer. Shadow growled, but Dorothy held him back. You have no job, no savings, no husband. Your son is overseas, unable to help you. You rent a house owned by my company. You buy groceries from stores I invest in. Every aspect of your life, every single aspect, passes through my sphere of influence. He leaned in, close enough that Dorothy could smell his cologne. Expensive, suffocating. I could end you, Mrs. Cole. Not violently, not dramatically. I would simply make you invisible. Truly invisible. Unable to work, unable to rent, unable to exist in this town you've called home for 10 years. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs. Or you can take $50,000 and walk away with your dignity intact. Your choice. Dorothy's hands were shaking. Her legs were shaking. Everything was shaking. But somewhere deep inside her, in the place that had survived a bad marriage and raised a good son and endured 8 years of being treated like furniture, something solid remained. My dignity, she said quietly, was never yours to give or take. Leonard stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed across the empty parking lot. You're brave, Mrs. Cole. I'll give you that. He turned toward his assuve, his men falling into step behind him. But bravery without power is just stubbornness. And stubbornness, in my experience, tends to get people hurt. He paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. You have 72 hours to reconsider. After that, well, let's just say I hope your son enjoys his deployment. It may be the only home he has left to come back to. The SUV pulled away, leaving Dorothy alone in the parking lot with Shadow and the weight of everything she'd just done. She should have taken the money. She knew she should have taken the money. Her rational mind screamed at her that she'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in the state. But another voice, quieter, stronger, reminded her of something Marcus had told her years ago when he'd come home from his first deployment, changed in ways she couldn't understand. There are some things you don't negotiate, Mom. Some lines you don't cross. Some people you don't bow to, no matter what they threaten. Because once you start bowing, you never stop. Dorothy climbed into her car, Shadow jumping into the passenger seat beside her. She was 62 years old. She had no job, no phone, no idea what would happen next, but she had her son, and she had her dignity. And right now, driving home under a sky that seemed too bright for how dark her world had become, she had to believe that was enough. It had to be enough. Marcus pulled into his mother's driveway at 6:47 a.m., just as the sun crested the trees behind her small rental house. The house looked the same as always. White siding, green shutters, a porch swing his father had installed 20 years ago, and his mother had never been able to replace. But something felt different. Off. Marcus couldn't explain it, but 15 years of operating in hostile environments had taught him to trust his instincts. He grabbed his bag and walked toward the front door. Before he could knock, it opened. Shadow hit him first, 70 pounds of German Shepherd launching off the porch and into his arms. Marcus caught the dog automatically, dropping his bag, and for a moment everything else fell away. The video, the rage, the 200-mile drive fueled by coffee and fury. Hey, boy, Marcus murmured, burying his face in Shadow's fur. Hey, I missed you too. Then he looked up, and his mother was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a bathrobe. Her hair was still damp. She'd tried to wash the champagne out, Marcus realized. Her eyes were red. Her left shoulder moved stiffly, like she was favoring it. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked. How are you?" He crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms. "I saw the video, Mom," he said quietly. "I came home." Dorothy Cole broke. All the strength she'd shown in the parking lot, all the defiance she'd mustered against Leonard Ashford, crumbled the moment her son's arms wrapped around her. She sobbed into his chest, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. And Marcus held her, saying nothing, letting her release the pain she'd been carrying alone. "I didn't want to worry you," she gasped between sobs. "You were deployed. You had important things to—" "You're the important thing," Marcus said. "You're always the important thing." They stood there for a long time, mother and son, while shadows circled their feet and the morning sun warmed the porch. Finally, Dorothy pulled back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her bathrobe. "I'm okay," she said. The lie was obvious. "I'm fine. It was nothing." "Show me your shoulder." "Marcus." "Mom." His voice was gentle but firm. "Show me." Dorothy hesitated. Then, slowly, she lowered the bathrobe off her left shoulder. The bruise was the size of Marcus's fist, purple and black and angry, spreading from her shoulder down toward her collarbone. Kyle's kick. The one that was meant for Shadow. Marcus's jaw tightened, his hands clenched. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." They went inside. Dorothy made coffee because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. And she told him. Everything. The champagne, the kicks, the filming, and the laughter. Vincent Marsh confiscating her phone. Leonard Ashford's offer in the parking lot. The 72-hour deadline. Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, staring at his coffee like it held answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. "The video," he said finally. "It's still online?" "I don't know. Leonard said he would make it disappear." "He can't." Marcus pulled out his phone, typed something, scrolled. "It's been shared too many times, downloaded, reposted. It's already on news aggregate sites." He looked up. 2 million views, Mom. This isn't going away." Dorothy's face paled. 2 million people saw? 2 million people saw what those men did to you." Marcus's voice hardened. "And now, 2 million people are going to watch me make them answer for it." "Marcus!" Dorothy reached across the table, gripping his hand. "These people are dangerous." "Leonard Ashford. You don't understand how powerful he is. He owns this town. The police chief golfs with him. The mayor owes him favors. If you go against him, then I need to be smart about it." Marcus met her eyes. "I'm not going to do anything stupid, Mom. I'm not going to punch anyone or threaten anyone or give them any excuse to turn me into the villain." He squeezed her hand. "But I'm also not going to let them get away with this. I can't. That video is out there. Your face is out there. And if I do nothing, if I take their money and stay quiet, then every person who watches it learns that money can buy silence, that power can crush dignity, that people like you don't matter." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears again. "Marcus." "You matter, Mom." His voice broke, just slightly, on the words. "You've always mattered. And it's time someone reminded them of that." Shadow patted over and rested his head on Marcus's knee, as if sensing the shift in the room. Marcus stroked the dog's ears absently, his mind already racing ahead. Planning, strategizing, identifying targets and vulnerabilities. He was a Navy SEAL. He had spent 15 years learning how to dismantle enemies with precision and patience. Now he had a new mission, and this time, it was personal. Marcus didn't sleep that night. While his mother finally drifted off in her bedroom, exhaustion pulling her under despite everything, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and Shadow at his feet. The dog hadn't left his side since he'd arrived. 4 years in Afghanistan had bonded them in ways that went beyond training, beyond commands. Shadow knew when Marcus was hunting, and right now, every muscle in the dog's body was alert. The video had been viewed 2.3 million times by midnight. Comments poured in by the thousands. Some were cruel, mocking Dorothy, calling her names that made Marcus's jaw clench so tight his teeth ached. But others were different, angry, demanding justice, asking who these people were and why they thought they could treat a human being like garbage. Marcus screenshot every comment, every share, every repost. He built a folder on his laptop labeled simply Evidence and began filling it with everything he could find. Preston Ashford III had a social media presence that read like a monument to entitlement. Yacht parties in Monaco, ski trips in Aspen, charity galas where he smiled for cameras while writing checks that probably came from his father's accountant. His Instagram bio read, "Living my best life. You should try it." Marcus clicked through photo after photo, building a timeline. Preston's friends appeared repeatedly. Kyle Mercer, the one who'd kicked Shadow, showed up in dozens of images. Country club events, beach houses, private planes. These men had never been told no. They'd never faced consequences. They'd grown up believing the world existed for their entertainment. That was about to change. At 2 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed. Jake Reeves. "You still awake?" "What do you have?" Jake let out a low whistle. "You weren't kidding about these people being connected. Leonard Ashford has donated to every major political campaign in the state for the last 20 years, both parties. He doesn't care about ideology. He cares about access." "What else?" "His company, Ashford Pharmaceuticals, has been sued 14 times in the last decade. Wrongful termination, workplace harassment, even one product liability case that got settled for 8 figures. Jake paused. All of them disappeared. Settlements with NDAs. Witnesses who suddenly couldn't remember anything. One plaintiff actually left the country. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "So they know how to make problems go away. They're experts at it. But here's where it gets interesting." Jake's voice dropped. "I found 3 other incidents involving Preston specifically. Bar fights, an assault allegation from an ex-girlfriend, a hit-and-run that was ruled inconclusive despite multiple witnesses. Let me guess, all buried. Deep, but not deep enough." Marcus could hear Jake typing in the background. "I've got names. The ex-girlfriend, her name is Amanda Chen. She's in Charlotte now. The hit-and-run victim was a college kid named Derek Santos. He's still in town, actually. Works at an auto body shop on the south side." Marcus wrote down the names. "What about the country club? Any history there?" "Oh, you're gonna love this. Vincent Marsh, the manager? 14 complaints filed by staff members over the past 5 years. Harassment, discrimination, wage theft. Not a single one resulted in disciplinary action." Jake paused. "The club's board of directors includes Leonard Ashford's brother-in-law." "Of course it does." "Marcus." Jake's tone shifted, serious now. "These people play dirty, really dirty. If you're going to go after them, you need to be careful. Like, witness protection level careful." "I'm always careful." "No, you're not. You're calculated. There's a difference." A sigh. "Just don't do anything I wouldn't do." "That leaves a lot of room." "Exactly." Marcus hung up and stared at his laptop screen. Preston Ashford's face smiled back at him from a charity gala photo, champagne glass raised, surrounded by people who probably had no idea what kind of monster they were celebrating. 15 years ago, Marcus would have handled this differently. 15 years ago, he would have found Preston in a dark parking lot and taught him a lesson with his fists. But he wasn't that person anymore. He'd learned that violence was a tool, not a solution, and some enemies couldn't be defeated with force. They had to be exposed. He needed to make the Ashfords destroy themselves, and he knew exactly where to start. The next morning, Marcus left before his mother woke up. He wrote her a note. "Gone to get breakfast, stay inside, love you," and drove toward the south side of town with Shadow in the passenger seat. Derek Santos worked at a place called Mike's Auto Body, a small shop squeezed between a pawn store and a laundromat. Marcus parked across the street and watched for 20 minutes, studying the rhythm of the business, the faces coming and going. Old habits. Finally, he crossed the street and pushed through the front door. A young man looked up from behind the counter. Mid-20s, dark hair. A scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheekbone. The kind of scar that came from broken glass. "Help you?" "Derek Santos?" The young man's expression flickered. Guarded now. "Who's asking?" Marcus kept his voice calm, friendly. "My name is Marcus Cole. I'm looking into Preston Ashford." Derek's face went pale. He actually took a step backward, knocking into a display of air fresheners. "I don't know anyone by that name. He hit you with his car 3 years ago, left you bleeding in the street. Then his family's lawyers convinced you to sign an NDA and take a settlement that probably didn't even cover your medical bills." Derek's hands were shaking. "I can't talk about that. I signed papers." "I know." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Derek the video of his mother. "He did this yesterday, to a 62-year-old woman. She's my mother." Derek watched the video. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. When it ended, he looked up at Marcus with something new in his eyes. "I was walking home from a party," Derek said quietly. "It was 2 in the morning. I heard the engine, but I didn't think—" He touched the scar on his face. "He was doing at least 50 in a residential zone. When I woke up in the hospital, there were already lawyers in my room. They had papers for me to sign before I even knew what day it was." "How much did they pay you?" $75,000. Derek laughed bitterly. "Sounds like a lot, right? But my medical bills were over $100,000. My insurance didn't cover half of it. I had to drop out of college, lost my scholarship, lost everything." He shook his head. "And Preston Ashford? He was on a yacht in the Caribbean the week after he put me in the hospital. I saw the photos on Instagram." Marcus nodded slowly. "Would you be willing to tell that story again? On camera?" Derek's eyes widened. "The NDA might not be enforceable. And even if it is, there are ways around it." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to do this for me, Derek. I'm asking if you want people to know what really happened. If you want Preston Ashford to finally face what he did to you." Derek was silent for a long moment. His eyes drifted to the scar in the mirror behind the counter. "There's a woman," he said finally. "Amanda Chen. She dated Preston for about 6 months. Derek swallowed hard. "He hurt her. Bad. She tried to press charges, but the police chief is friends with his father. The case never went anywhere. I have her name. She's in Charlotte. She won't talk to you." Derek's voice was certain. "She's terrified of them. The last time someone tried to interview her about Preston, she got a visit from men in suits. They didn't threaten her directly. They just reminded her how easy it would be for her to lose everything." Marcus filed that information away. What if she knew she wasn't alone? What if she knew there were others? Derek considered this. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone. "I have her number. We stayed in touch after everything. Let me call her first. Warn her you're coming. He met Marcus's eyes. But you need to understand something. The Ashfords don't just fight dirty. They fight to destroy. If you go after them, they will come after everyone you love. Marcus thought of his mother, her bruised shoulder, her shattered phone, the way she'd stood alone in that parking lot and refused Leonard Ashford's money. They already did, he said quietly. Now it's my turn. He was halfway back to his truck when his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus answered anyway. Mr. Cole? A voice he recognized, smooth, controlled. Leonard Ashford. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Marcus stopped walking. Shadow's ears flattened at the change in his posture. How did you get this number? I have resources, as I'm sure you're beginning to understand. Leonard's voice carried a note of amusement. I hear you've been busy this morning, visiting old friends of my son, asking questions that have already been answered. Marcus said nothing. Let the silence stretch. I'm a reasonable man, Mr. Cole. Your mother refused my offer yesterday, but I understand emotions were running high. I'm willing to extend my generosity to you directly. A pause. $100,000. Cash. Untraceable. All you have to do is take your mother somewhere far away and forget any of this ever happened. And if I don't? Then I'll be forced to take steps I'd rather avoid. Leonard's voice hardened. You're a Navy SEAL. Impressive, truly. But you're also a man with a service record that includes classified operations in countries we're not supposed to be operating in. It would be unfortunate if certain details of those operations found their way to people who might misinterpret them. Marcus's blood ran cold. You're threatening to leak classified military information? I'm simply pointing out that everyone has vulnerabilities, even heroes. Leonard's smile was audible through the phone. You have 24 hours to reconsider, Mr. Cole. After that, I stop being reasonable. The line went dead. Marcus stood in the parking lot, his mind racing. Leonard Ashford had just threatened to expose classified operations. That meant he had contacts in intelligence, maybe military, maybe both. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about survival. He called Jake immediately. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Leonard Ashford knows about my service record. The classified parts. Jake was silent for a long moment. That's not possible. Those files are sealed. Like, actually sealed. Not just redacted. Compartmentalized. Apparently not sealed enough. Marcus, if he has access to that kind of information, we're not just dealing with a rich family. We're dealing with someone who has serious government connections. Marcus thought about the political donations, the buried cases, the police chief who played golf with Leonard every Sunday. How high does this go? I don't know, but I'm starting to think it goes a lot higher than either of us realized. Marcus drove back to his mother's house in silence, his mind working through scenarios. Leonard Ashford had just revealed something important. He was scared. Scared enough to threaten a Navy SEAL with exposure. Scared enough to try bribery before the investigation had even really begun. That meant there was more to find. Bigger secrets. Deeper corruption. Marcus just had to dig deep enough to uncover them before Leonard buried him first. Dorothy was waiting on the porch when he pulled into the driveway. Her face was pale. Someone was here, she said before he could even get out of the truck. Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where his sidearm would have been if he'd been carrying. Who? I don't know. A black SUV. It parked across the street for about an hour, just watching the house. When I went to the window to get a better look, it drove away. Her voice trembled. Marcus, I'm scared. He pulled her into a hug, one hand stroking her silver hair. "I know, Mom. I know. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded against his chest. "Good. Because things are going to get worse before they get better. But I promise you, I swear to you, I'm going to make this right." That afternoon, Marcus drove to the county records office. He spent 4 hours pulling property records, business filings, and tax documents. What he found made his stomach turn. Ashford Holdings LLC owned 63 properties in the county. Rental homes, apartment buildings, commercial spaces. And buried in the paperwork, a pattern emerged. Properties purchased at below-market rates from owners who had recently experienced financial difficulties. Foreclosures, bankruptcies, medical emergencies. The Ashfords weren't just rich, they were predators. They waited for people to stumble, then swooped in to take everything. Marcus photographed every document, built his evidence folder thicker and thicker. At 5 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Derek Santos. "Amanda will meet you tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop called The Grind on Morrison Street in Charlotte. She'll be wearing a blue scarf." Marcus replied, "Thank you." A moment later, another text. "Be careful. She's fragile, and she knows things that could destroy them." That night, Marcus sat with his mother on the porch swing, shadow stretched out at their feet. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "I talked to Jake," Marcus said quietly. "He thinks there might be more to this than we realized. Leonard Ashford has connections, serious connections." Dorothy nodded slowly. "I always knew he was powerful. I just didn't know how powerful." "Are you having second thoughts? About the money?" Dorothy turned to look at him. Her eyes were tired, but clear. "I raised you to believe that some things matter more than money, Marcus. Dignity, truth, standing up for what's right even when it's hard." She reached out and took his hand. "I'm too old to start believing something different now." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm going to Charlotte tomorrow. There's a woman there who might be able to help us." "The one Preston hurt?" "Yes." Dorothy was quiet for a moment, then, "Be kind to her, Marcus. Whatever she tells you, however she tells it, be kind. Women like her, women who've been hurt by men with power, they carry that pain forever, even when they look like they're fine." Marcus thought about the missions he'd run, the people he'd rescued from situations no one should have to survive, the things he'd seen that still woke him up at 3 a.m. "I know, Mom," he said softly. "I know." The drive to Charlotte took 3 hours. Marcus left before dawn, wanting to arrive early enough to scout the area. Old habits. He parked 2 blocks from the Grind and walked the perimeter, identifying exits, studying faces, looking for anything out of place. At 1:45 p.m., he entered the coffee shop and took a seat in the back corner, facing the door. Shadow waited in the truck with the windows cracked and a bowl of water. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman walked in wearing a blue scarf. Amanda Chen was in her late 20s, slender, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She moved carefully, like someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Her eyes scanned the room before landing on Marcus, and he saw something flicker in them. Fear, recognition, determination, all in the space of a heartbeat. She sat down across from him without ordering anything. "Derek said you're going after Preston." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is that true?" "Yes." "Why?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the video. Amanda watched it in silence, her face unreadable. When it ended, she handed the phone back. "That woman is your mother?" "Yes," Amanda nodded slowly. "She's brave, standing there like that, taking it. I wasn't brave. When Preston..." She stopped, swallowed, started again. When Preston hurt me, I ran. I signed their papers and took their money and ran as far as I could. You survived, Marcus said gently. That's not cowardice. That's strength. Amanda's eyes glistened. You don't understand. I had evidence, photos, recordings, things that could have put him in prison. But his lawyers, they made it all disappear. They threatened my family. My parents got a visit from men who said my father's restaurant might have code violations. My brother, he was applying to law school, and suddenly his recommendations started getting lost. She shook her head. They didn't just come after me. They came after everyone I loved. That's how they operate, Marcus said. But it only works if we stay silent, if we stay alone. You think you can beat them? Amanda's voice cracked. Leonard Ashford has been doing this for decades. He knows every judge, every prosecutor, every journalist in the state. Anyone who might expose him is either on his payroll or too scared to try. Not everyone, Marcus leaned forward. I have contacts in investigative journalism. Real journalists, not the ones the Ashfords have bought. And I have something they've never faced before. What's that? A story too big to bury. Marcus pulled out a folder, printouts of Derek's medical records, property documents, complaint filings from the country club, screenshots of the viral video. Preston Ashford has been hurting people for years. His father has been covering it up for years. But this video changed everything. 2 million people have already seen it. 2 million people are already asking questions. If we give them answers, real answers, documented answers, not even Leonard Ashford can make it disappear. Amanda stared at the folder. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. I still have the recordings, she said quietly. Preston didn't know I was documenting everything. I kept them on a flash drive, hidden in a safe deposit box. I was too scared to use them, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy them. Marcus's heart pounded. What's on them? Everything. Amanda's voice hardened. Him admitting what he did to Derek Santos. Bragging about how his father pays off cops. Threatening me when I tried to leave. She looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. If you're really going to do this, if you're really going to take them down, I want to help. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of watching him hurt people and get away with it. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we do this together. But you need to understand, once we start, there's no going back. The Ashfords will come after us with everything they have. Amanda's jaw tightened. Let them come. I've been running for 3 years. It's time to stop. They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Amanda told Marcus everything. The night Preston hit her, the hospital visit she never reported, the phone calls from lawyers that came before she'd even been discharged. She told him about the other women, too, at least 4 that she knew of. All of them silenced. All of them paid off. All of them living with wounds that money couldn't heal. When they finally parted, Amanda gripped Marcus's hand tightly. Thank you, she said, for believing me, for believing us. Thank me when it's over, Marcus replied. This is just the beginning. He was walking back to his truck when his phone rang. His mother's number. Mom? What's wrong? Dorothy's voice was shaking. Marcus, someone broke into the house. They didn't take anything, but they left something. On the kitchen table. Marcus's blood turned to ice. What did they leave? A long pause. Then, barely a whisper. Photos. Of you. Of me. Of Shadow. Her voice broke. And a note. It says, 72 hours are up. Hope you enjoyed, Charlotte. Marcus was already running toward his truck. They'd been watching him. The whole time, they'd been watching him. and now they knew exactly what he was planning. The war had just begun. Marcus drove 90 miles an hour the entire way back, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind racing faster than the truck's engine. They had been inside his mother's house. They had walked through her kitchen, touched her things, left their poison on her table. While he was in Charlotte gathering evidence, they were sending a message that no amount of evidence could protect the people he loved. Shadow sensed his tension, pressing closer against the passenger door, ears flat, eyes watchful. "It's okay, boy," Marcus said, but his voice was hollow. It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. He called Jake while he drove. "I need a safe house. Tonight." "What happened?" "They broke into my mother's place, left surveillance photos. They know everywhere I've been, everyone I've talked to." Jake cursed under his breath. "These people don't mess around." "Okay, I've got a buddy who owns a cabin about 40 minutes outside town. Isolated, hard to find. I'll text you the coordinates. I need something else." "Name it." "Eyes. Someone watching the Ashford estate. I want to know every car that comes and goes, every visitor, every delivery truck. If Leonard Ashford sneezes, I want to know what direction." "That's surveillance. I know what it is." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Can you do it or not?" A pause. Then, "I know some guys. Private security, ex-military. They owe me favors. I'll make some calls." "Thank you." "Marcus," Jake's voice dropped. "Be careful. When you corner powerful people, they do desperate things. And desperate people are dangerous." Marcus thought about the photos on his mother's table, the note, the implicit threat behind every word. "So am I," he said quietly, and hung up. Dorothy was standing on the porch when he pulled into the driveway, Shadow's leash wrapped tight around her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying. She was past crying. She was somewhere beyond fear now, in that cold, quiet place where survival instinct takes over. Marcus jumped out of the truck and crossed the yard in 3 strides. "Are you hurt?" "No, they didn't. No one was here when it happened. I went to the grocery store for 20 minutes. When I came back..." She trailed off, her voice cracking. "Show me." They went inside together. The house looked the same as always. Same worn furniture, same faded curtains, same photos of Marcus in his dress uniform on the mantel. But the air felt different, violated. A stranger's presence lingered like smoke. The photos were spread across the kitchen table. Marcus picked them up one by one, his stomach tightening with each image. Him getting out of his truck at his mother's house, time-stamped yesterday morning. Dorothy walking Shadow around the block, time-stamped yesterday afternoon. Him entering Mike's auto body. This morning, him sitting in the Grind coffee shop with Amanda Chen. 3 hours ago. And the note, typed, impersonal, chilling in its simplicity. 72 hours are up. Hope you enjoyed Charlotte. Next time, we won't just leave photos. Marcus set the note down carefully, fighting the urge to crumple it in his fist. "Pack a bag," he said. "Just essentials. We're leaving." Dorothy's eyes widened. "Leaving? Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you." "Marcus, I can't just... This is my home. My life is here." "Your life is in danger here." He took her hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Mom, listen to me. These people broke into your house in broad daylight. They've been following me across state lines. They have resources we haven't even seen yet." His voice softened. "I can't protect you and fight them at the same time. Not if you're here. Not if you're exposed." Dorothy's chin trembled. "What about you? If I go somewhere safe, what happens to you?" "I've finished this." Marcus's voice was steel. "I've been playing defense, gathering evidence, trying to do this the right way. But they just showed me that the right way isn't enough. Not with people like this. What are you going to do? Marcus thought about Amanda's flash drive, Derek's testimony, the pattern of buried complaints and silenced victims. He thought about Leonard Ashford's smug voice on the phone, threatening to destroy everything he'd worked for. He thought about Preston's smile in that video, pouring champagne on a woman who'd done nothing but exist in his presence. "I'm going to make them wish they'd never touched you," he said simply. The cabin was exactly what Jake had promised. Small, isolated, surrounded by pine trees so thick you couldn't see the road from the porch. Marcus spent an hour walking the perimeter, checking sightlines, identifying escape routes, old habits. The habits that had kept him alive in places where death waited around every corner. Dorothy settled into the single bedroom, while Marcus set up a makeshift command center on the kitchen table. Laptop, phone, the folder of evidence that grew thicker every day. Shadow patrolled the cabin's interior, occasionally pressing his nose against Marcus's leg, as if to remind him that he wasn't alone. At 9 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Cole?" Leonard Ashford's voice, smooth as ever. "I understand you've been traveling today. Charlotte is lovely this time of year." Marcus said nothing. Let the silence stretch. "I also understand that you've moved your mother to a new location. Very wise, very cautious." A soft chuckle. "But I think we both know that caution has its limits. There's nowhere you can hide her that I can't find. There's no one you can talk to that I don't already know about." "Is that supposed to scare me?" "It's supposed to educate you." Leonard's voice hardened. "You're a soldier, Mr. Cole. You understand strategy. You understand the importance of knowing when you're outmatched." A pause. "I'm giving you one final opportunity to walk away. Take your mother. Leave this town. Start over somewhere new. I'll even fund your relocation. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. And if I don't, then you force me to treat you as an enemy. And I assure you, Mr. Cole, my enemies do not fare well." Marcus looked at the photos spread across his laptop screen. Derek's scarred face, Amanda's haunted eyes. His mother kneeling on marble floors while champagne dripped from her hair. "Your son poured champagne on a 62-year-old woman," Marcus said quietly. "His friend kicked a dog that served this country for 4 years. And you think the solution is more money? More threats? I think the solution is reality. The reality is that power wins, Mr. Cole. It always wins. The only question is how much you're willing to sacrifice before you accept that." "I've sacrificed more than you can imagine." Marcus's voice dropped, cold, controlled. "I've watched men die in places you'll never see, for causes you'll never understand. I've made choices that keep me awake at night, and would keep you awake for the rest of your life. So don't talk to me about sacrifice. Don't talk to me about reality." He leaned forward, as if Leonard could see him through the phone. "You want to know what reality looks like? Reality is that your son is a predator. Your family is a machine for destroying people. And machines, Mr. Ashford, can be taken apart." A long pause. When Leonard spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder. Colder. "You've made your choice, Mr. Cole. I hope you don't regret it." The line went dead. Marcus set the phone down and stared at the wall. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was calm. 15 years of training had taught him to control his body even when his mind was screaming. Leonard Ashford had just declared war. Now, it was time to fight back. The next morning, Marcus drove back into town alone. He left Shadow with his mother. The dog's protective instincts would serve her better than his company. Dorothy had tried to argue, but Marcus had been firm. He'll keep you safe. That's what he was trained for. That's what he needs. His first stop was the county courthouse. He spent 3 hours in the records room, pulling every document he could find related to Ashford Holdings, Ashford Pharmaceuticals, and the Ashford family's charitable foundation. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Shell companies, offshore accounts, donations that coincided suspiciously with zoning decisions and permit approvals. The Ashfords weren't just rich, they were corrupt. And corruption always left trails. His second stop was the police station. Marcus walked through the front doors like he belonged there, nodding to the desk sergeant, making his way toward the administrative offices. He'd done reconnaissance missions in hostile territory with less preparation. This was just another kind of battlefield. Chief Raymond Holt's office was on the second floor. Marcus knocked twice and entered without waiting for a response. Holt looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face before settling into practiced neutrality. He was in his late 50s, heavy-set, with the kind of tan that came from golf courses rather than honest work. His uniform was pressed. His badge was polished. Everything about him screamed authority. "Can I help you?" "Chief Holt." Marcus closed the door behind him. "My name is Marcus Cole. I believe you know my mother, Dorothy Cole. She worked at the Ocean View Country Club until your friend Preston Ashford assaulted her." Holt's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm aware of the incident. It's being investigated." "No, it isn't." Marcus sat down without being invited. "The incident report was filed 3 days ago. No officers have been assigned. No witnesses have been interviewed. The only action taken was a phone call from your office to the club manager, advising him to handle it internally." "How do you know that?" "I have friends. Friends with access." Marcus leaned forward. "Chief, I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here to give you an opportunity. You've been protecting the Ashfords for a long time. I understand why. They're powerful. They're connected. They make your life easier. But this time is different. This time, there's video evidence. 2 million views and counting. The story isn't going away." Holt's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you have a choice. You can continue covering for them, and when this thing explodes, and it will explode, you'll go down with them. Or you can start doing your job. Actually investigate. Actually hold people accountable." Marcus paused. "I'm not asking you to be a hero, Chief. I'm just asking you not to be a villain." For a long moment, Holt said nothing. His fingers drummed against his desk. His eyes studied Marcus with the wariness of a man who had survived decades in a system built on compromise. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Holt said finally. "Leonard Ashford, he doesn't just have money. He has leverage. On everyone, including me." "What kind of leverage?" Holt laughed bitterly. "The kind that ends careers, ends marriages, ends lives if you push hard enough." He shook his head. "I've been chief for 12 years. In that time, I've seen 3 good cops try to stand up to the Ashfords. One got transferred to traffic duty until he quit. One had an affair that suddenly became very public, cost him his family and his pension. The third," Holt's voice dropped. "The third had a car accident. Single vehicle, no witnesses. He survived, but he never walked again." Marcus absorbed this information. "So you're scared." "I'm realistic. There's a difference." "There's really not." Marcus stood. "But I appreciate your honesty, Chief. It tells me everything I need to know about where the lines are drawn in this town." He was at the door when Holt spoke again. "Cole." The chief's voice was tired, defeated. "For what it's worth, I didn't sign up for this. 30 years ago, I became a cop because I wanted to help people, protect people. Somewhere along the way," he trailed off. "Just be careful. The Ashfords don't fight fair. And when they decide someone's a threat, they don't stop until that threat is eliminated." Marcus nodded once. "Neither do I." He drove to the marina next. His mother loved the water, always had, even after his father's death. She used to bring Marcus here when he was a child, watching the boats come and go, dreaming of journeys they'd never take. Now he walked the docks alone, his mind working through strategies, contingencies, backup plans. He needed to get Amanda's recordings. He needed to coordinate with Jake's journalist contacts. He needed to... Well, if it isn't the Navy SEAL. Marcus turned slowly. Preston Ashford stood at the end of the dock, flanked by Kyle Mercer and two other men Marcus didn't recognize. Security, probably. Hired muscle. Preston was dressed in white linen, looking like he'd just stepped off a yacht photo shoot, his smile as empty as ever. "I heard you've been asking questions about me," Preston said, sauntering closer. "Digging through old files, bothering old friends." Marcus stayed perfectly still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Preston stopped a few feet away, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne. Expensive, suffocating, just like his father's. "You know what I think? I think you're angry because I ruined your mommy's day. I think you're trying to play hero, and you're too stupid to realize you've already lost." "I haven't lost anything." "No?" Preston's smile widened. "Check your truck." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Oh, don't worry," Preston continued, clearly enjoying the moment. "We didn't plant a bomb or anything. That would be too dramatic. We just made a few adjustments. Brake lines are so fragile, you know. One little cut, and suddenly stopping becomes very difficult." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to close the distance, to wrap his hands around Preston's throat, to make him pay for every cruel word and vicious act. He could do it. He was faster, stronger, better trained. Preston wouldn't last 3 seconds, but that's what they wanted. That's what this whole performance was designed to provoke. Marcus attacks Preston. Marcus goes to jail. The story becomes about a violent veteran instead of a corrupt family. So Marcus smiled instead. "Thank you," he said quietly. Preston blinked. "What?" "Thank you for telling me about the brakes. Now I know to get them checked." Marcus tilted his head. "And thank you for doing it in public, with witnesses, on a dock that probably has security cameras." He pulled out his phone. "I wonder how your father's lawyers will explain this one." Preston's smile faltered. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Marcus gestured toward the marina office. "There's a camera right there, and another one over the fuel station. And I'm pretty sure that gentleman on the blue sailboat has been watching this entire conversation." He waved. The man on the sailboat waved back. Kyle Mercer grabbed Preston's arm. "Let's go. This isn't worth it." Preston shook him off, his face reddening. "This isn't over, Cole. You hear me? You think you're so smart, but you're nothing. Your family is nothing. When my father is done with you, no one will even remember your name." "They'll remember yours," Marcus said calmly. "They'll remember what you did to my mother, and they'll remember what I did about it." Preston spat at Marcus's feet, then turned and stormed down the dock, his entourage following like obedient dogs. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before allowing himself to breathe. That was close. Too close. Preston was unraveling, getting desperate, making mistakes. Desperate people were dangerous. Holt had been right about that. But desperate people also got sloppy, and sloppy left openings. He called a tow truck, explained that he suspected brake tampering, and asked them to document everything they found. Then he called Jake. "I need you to check something. Marina security footage from the last hour, and any traffic cameras on the road between here and my mother's rental house." "What happened?" "Preston just admitted to cutting my brake lines. In public. With witnesses." Jake let out a low whistle. These people really are stupid. Not stupid, arrogant. There's a difference. Marcus watched the tow truck arrive, watched the driver crawl under his vehicle, watched his expression change from boredom to alarm. And arrogance, Jake, is how empires fall. That night, Marcus sat in the cabin with his mother. The evidence of Preston's sabotage spread across the table. Photos of the cut brake lines, a statement from the tow truck driver, witness contact information from the marina. "This is attempted murder," Dorothy said quietly. "They tried to kill you." "They tried to scare me. The brake lines were cut just enough to fail after extended use. I wouldn't have noticed until I was on the highway, going fast, needing to stop suddenly." Marcus shook his head. "It's smart, deniable. Could look like mechanical failure if you didn't know what you were looking for. But you know." "I know." Marcus looked at his mother. "And now I have evidence, real evidence. Combined with Amanda's recordings, Derek's testimony, the property records, the buried complaints, it's enough. It's finally enough." Dorothy reached across the table and took his hand. "What happens now?" "Now I make a phone call." Marcus picked up his phone. "Jake's journalist contact has been waiting for a story big enough to justify going after someone as powerful as the Ashfords. I think I finally have one." The call lasted an hour. Marcus walked the journalist through everything: the video, the cover-ups, the pattern of abuse and intimidation, the attempted sabotage at the marina. When he finished, there was silence on the other end. Then, "This is incredible. If even half of this checks out, it's not just a story, it's an exposé, maybe even a documentary." "How long do you need?" "Give me 48 hours to verify sources. I'll need to talk to Amanda Chen directly, and Derek Santos. Get their consent to use their testimonies." "They'll cooperate. I've already spoken to both of them." "Then we move fast. The Ashfords will try to kill this story once they find out it's coming. We need to be ready to publish before they can apply pressure." "Understood." Marcus paused. "One more thing. When this breaks, my mother needs to be protected. Is there any way to keep her name out of it initially, at least until the story gains traction?" "I can try, but she's at the center of this, Mr. Cole. The video is what started everything. People will want to know who she is." Marcus looked at his mother, sitting quietly on the cabin's worn couch, Shadow's head in her lap. She looked older than she had a week ago, more fragile. But there was something else in her eyes now, too. Something that looked like determination. "Let me talk to her," Marcus said. "I'll call you back." He hung up and sat down beside Dorothy. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I heard most of that," Dorothy said finally. "They want to tell the whole story, including my part." "You don't have to do this, Mom. We can find another way." "No," Dorothy's voice was firm. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, working jobs where no one knew my name, enduring things because fighting back seemed impossible." She met his eyes. "Those men didn't just humiliate me, Marcus. They tried to erase me, to prove that people like me don't matter, that we can be hurt, used, thrown away, and nothing will change." "Mom, I won't let them be right." Dorothy straightened her spine, that familiar strength returning to her posture. "If telling my story helps stop them from hurting someone else, if it shows other people that they don't have to accept being invisible, then that's what I want. That's what I choose." Marcus felt something swell in his chest. Pride, grief, love so fierce it almost hurt. "I'll protect you," he said. "Whatever happens. Whatever it takes." Dorothy smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. "I know you will. You always have." Outside, the pine trees whispered in the wind. Shadow lifted his head, ears pricked toward some distant sound, then settled again with a soft exhale. Somewhere in the darkness, Leonard Ashford was planning his next move. Preston was nursing his wounded pride. An empire built on cruelty and silence was preparing its defenses. But Marcus had something they didn't expect. He had the truth. And tomorrow, the whole world was going to hear it. The story broke at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was awake when it happened, sitting at the cabin's kitchen table with his laptop open and his third cup of coffee growing cold beside him. He'd been refreshing the news website every 30 seconds for the past hour, waiting, watching, barely breathing. And then there it was. Exclusive, inside the Ashford Empire, a pattern of abuse, cover-ups, and corruption. The headline hit like a thunderclap. Within minutes, it was the most read story on the site. Within an hour, other outlets were picking it up, running their own versions, requesting interviews. Marcus's phone started buzzing and didn't stop. Dorothy emerged from the bedroom, shadow at her heels, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Is it done?" "It's done." Marcus turned the laptop toward her. They used everything: Derek's testimony, Amanda's recordings, the property records, the brake line sabotage, all of it. Dorothy sat down slowly, her hand finding Shadow's head automatically. She read in silence for several minutes, her expression shifting from fear to disbelief to something that looked almost like hope. "They named him," she whispered. "Preston. They actually named him." "They named all of them. Preston, Leonard, Vincent Marsh, even Chief Holt." Marcus leaned back in his chair. The recordings Amanda provided were the key. Preston, on tape, bragging about how his father pays off cops, admitting what he did to Derek, threatening her when she tried to leave. What happens now? Now we wait. The story is out. The evidence is public. It's not something they can bury anymore. Marcus reached across the table and took his mother's hand. "But Mom, this is going to get intense. The Ashfords will fight back. They'll try to discredit the sources, attack the journalist, spin the narrative. We need to be ready for that." Dorothy squeezed his hand. "I've been ready for 30 years, Marcus. I just didn't know it." The first response from the Ashfords came at 8:47 a.m. A statement released through their corporate communications office. Carefully worded, legally vetted, completely hollow. The Ashford family is aware of recent media reports containing serious allegations. These claims are categorically false and appear to be part of a coordinated campaign to damage our family's reputation. We have engaged legal counsel and will pursue all available remedies against those responsible for spreading this defamatory content. Marcus read it twice, then laughed. "They're going with denial. Classic." "Will it work?" Dorothy asked. "Not this time. There's too much evidence, too many sources, and the video of what they did to you has been seen by millions." Marcus shook his head. "They can deny all they want. People know what they saw." By noon, the story had gone national. CNN picked it up first, running a segment that featured the original viral video alongside excerpts from Amanda's recordings. Then MSNBC, then Fox. Then every local news station within 100 miles of the Ashford estate. The narrative was shifting, and the Ashfords couldn't stop it. Marcus watched it unfold from the cabin, tracking social media responses, monitoring news coverage, coordinating with Jake's journalist contact. It was like watching a military operation in real time, except instead of soldiers and weapons, the battlefield was information. At 2 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Cole." A woman's voice this time. Professional. Cold. "This is Victoria Hayes, General Counsel for Ashford Pharmaceuticals. I'm calling to inform you that the company is preparing legal action against you personally for defamation, interference with business relationships, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Marcus almost smiled. That was fast. "We take threats to our client's reputation very seriously." "As you should. But here's the thing, Ms. Hayes. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And everything in that story is true. Every word, every document, every recording. He paused. If you'd like to explain to a jury how your client's son admitted on tape to paying off police officers and threatening witnesses, I'd be happy to provide additional materials. Silence on the other end. Marcus could almost hear the calculations happening. The realization that this wasn't a fight they could win in court. This isn't over, Mr. Cole. No, Marcus agreed. It's just beginning. The call ended. Marcus set his phone down and looked at his mother. They're scared, he said. Threatening lawsuits is what people do when they're scared. What about their other weapons? Dorothy's voice was quiet. The kind that don't go through lawyers. Marcus thought about the brake lines, the surveillance photos, the men in suits who had visited Amanda years ago. I've got people watching. Jake's contacts are monitoring the Ashford estate. If they try anything physical, we'll know. And if knowing isn't enough? Marcus met her eyes. Then I'll handle it, the way I was trained to handle things. The afternoon brought more revelations. Jake called at 3:15 with news that made Marcus's stomach drop. You need to see this. Channel 7 is about to run an interview with Chief Holt. Marcus turned on the television, his heart pounding. Chief Raymond Holt sat in what looked like his living room, facing a camera with the expression of a man who had nothing left to lose. His uniform was gone, replaced by a plain button-down shirt. His voice was steady. I've been protecting the Ashford family for 12 years, Holt said, looking directly into the camera. I buried complaints. I discouraged investigations. I did things I'm not proud of, because I was afraid of what they would do to me and my family if I didn't. The interviewer leaned forward. What changed? A Navy SEAL named Marcus Cole showed up in my office 3 days ago. He told me I had a choice. Keep covering for them and go down with them, or start doing my job. Holt's voice cracked. I spent 30 years in law enforcement. I became a cop because I wanted to protect people. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. He took a breath. I'm not going to forget anymore. Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. Chief Holt, the man who played golf with Leonard Ashford every Sunday, who had buried 14 complaints and intimidated witnesses, was turning. He's cooperating, Marcus said, his voice hollow. He's actually cooperating. Dorothy pressed her hand to her mouth. Is this good? It's more than good. It's everything. Marcus grabbed his phone. If Holt testifies about what he knows, the payoffs, the cover-ups, the obstruction, the Ashfords are finished. Not just Preston, all of them. The interview continued, Holt naming dates and dollar amounts, describing meetings with Leonard Ashford's lawyers, explaining how complaints disappeared and witnesses were pressured. It was a confession and an accusation all at once. By the time it ended, Marcus's phone was exploding with notifications. The state attorney general just announced an investigation, Jake reported. They're looking at everything, the pharmaceutical company, the real estate holdings, the charitable foundation. It's a full-scale probe. How long until they make arrests? Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on what they find and how fast they find it. Marcus thought about Preston, about the smug smile on his face when he'd admitted to cutting the brake lines, about the casual cruelty with which he'd poured champagne on a 62-year-old woman for entertainment. I want to know the moment anything happens, Marcus said. The moment they move on anyone. You'll know, I promise. That night, Marcus sat with his mother on the cabin porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. Shadow lay between them, his breathing slow and peaceful. I never thought I'd see this day, Dorothy said quietly. When I woke up that morning, the morning they did what they did, I thought I was invisible. I thought nothing I experienced mattered. I thought men like Preston Ashford could do whatever they wanted, and people like me just had to accept it. You were never invisible, Mom. You were just surrounded by people who refused to see. Dorothy turned to look at him. You saw. You always saw. You raised me to. Marcus reached over and took her hand. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, started with you. With watching you get up every morning and go to work even when Dad made your life miserable. With seeing you put dinner on the table even when there wasn't enough money. With learning that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. Tears slipped down Dorothy's cheeks. I didn't know you noticed. I noticed everything. Marcus's voice thickened. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again. The next morning brought the first arrest. Marcus's phone rang at 7:22 a.m. Jake's voice was breathless. Turn on the news, now! The footage showed Vincent Marsh being led out of his home in handcuffs, his perfectly pressed suit wrinkled, his practiced smile replaced by something that looked like terror. Charges: obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to commit assault. They got him, Dorothy breathed. They actually got him. He's just the beginning, Marcus watched as the police car pulled away. Marsh is a small fish. He'll make a deal. Trade information for a lighter sentence. And when he does, he'll give them the bigger fish. Exactly. The press conference happened at noon. The county prosecutor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, stood behind a podium and announced that additional arrests were expected within 48 hours. The evidence gathered in this investigation reveals a pattern of criminal behavior spanning more than a decade, she said. No one is above the law. No amount of money or influence will protect those who have harmed vulnerable members of our community. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time since he'd watched that video on his phone at Naval Station Norfolk, he allowed himself to hope. But hope, he knew, was a dangerous thing. The Ashfords weren't going to surrender quietly. The attack came at 4 p.m. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee when Shadow suddenly stood, his ears flat, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Marcus froze, every sense on alert. "Mom?" he called. "Stay in the bedroom." "What's happening?" "Just stay there." Marcus moved silently to the window, peering through the curtain. A black SUV was parked at the end of the driveway. 3 men were getting out. They weren't wearing suits this time. They were wearing tactical gear. Marcus's mind raced. The cabin was isolated. Help was 40 minutes away at best. He was armed. He'd brought his service weapon from Norfolk, just in case. But 3 against 1 were bad odds, even for a SEAL. Unless he changed the odds. "Mom." His voice was calm, controlled. "There's a root cellar under the floor in the pantry. Take Shadow and get down there. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "Marcus, now." He heard her move, heard the creak of the pantry door, heard Shadow's nails clicking on the wooden floor. Good. They were safe. Or as safe as they could be. Marcus grabbed his weapon and slipped out the back door. The men were approaching from the front, moving in a tactical formation. Professional. Military trained, maybe, or ex-military, hired for a job that didn't require asking questions. Marcus circled around the cabin, using the trees for cover. His breathing was steady. His hands were still. 15 years of training had prepared him for moments exactly like this. The first man reached the cabin's front porch. Marcus stepped out of the shadows behind him. "I wouldn't go in there if I were you." The man spun, reaching for his weapon. Marcus was faster. One strike to the throat, another to the knee, and the man was on the ground, gasping. The other 2 reacted instantly, fanning out, weapons drawn. Marcus ducked behind a tree as a bullet splintered the bark inches from his head. "Listen to me carefully," Marcus called out. "You're professionals. I respect that. But you're in over your heads. Whatever the Ashfords are paying you, it's not worth dying for." "Shut up," one of them yelled back. "You don't know anything about us." "I know you're former military. I can tell by the way you move. I know you're probably here because someone offered you enough money to look the other way about who you're working for." Marcus's voice hardened. "But I also know that right now, state investigators are building a case against the Ashford family. Anyone connected to them is going to go down too, including hired contractors who show up at remote cabins to intimidate witnesses." Silence. Marcus could almost hear them thinking. "I'm giving you one chance," Marcus continued. "Walk away. Go back to wherever you came from and pretend this never happened. Or stay and find out exactly what a Navy SEAL does to people who threaten his family." A long pause. Then footsteps, moving away from the cabin. Marcus waited until the SUV's engine faded into the distance before allowing himself to breathe. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from adrenaline finally finding release. "Mom," he called, moving back toward the cabin. "It's safe. You can come out." Dorothy emerged from the pantry, shadow pressed against her side. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "They're gone?" "They're gone." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "And they won't be back." "How do you know?" Marcus thought about the fear he'd heard in their footsteps, the hesitation, the calculation. Because they're professionals, and professionals don't take jobs that get them killed. That night, Marcus made 2 calls. The first was to Jake. "Someone sent contractors after us. 3 men, tactical gear, military training." "Are you okay?" "We're fine. They backed off. But the Ashfords are getting desperate." "Desperate is dangerous." "Desperate is also sloppy. Can your contacts trace the SUV? License plate, rental records, anything?" "I'll try. No promises." The second call was to the journalist who had broken the story. "I need you to add something to your reporting. The Ashfords sent armed men to the cabin where my mother and I are staying. They tried to intimidate us into silence." "Can you prove it?" "I have the license plate. I have descriptions of the men. And I have a witness, my mother." Marcus paused. This isn't just about covering up past crimes anymore. They're actively trying to obstruct a federal investigation. That's a whole new set of charges. "I'll need to verify independently. But if what you're saying is true," the journalist's voice sharpened with excitement, "this could be the final nail, the thing that makes everything else stick." "Make it stick," Marcus said, "whatever it takes." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, interviews, and mounting tension. The follow-up story ran, detailing the attempted intimidation at the cabin. Public outrage spiked. Politicians who had accepted Ashford donations suddenly found reasons to return them. Business partners who had smiled beside Leonard at charity galas began issuing statements distancing themselves from the family. And then, on Thursday morning, the second arrest happened. Marcus watched it live on television, his mother beside him, shadow at their feet. Preston Ashford III walked out of his family's estate in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Reporters swarmed the police car. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted from every direction. "Mr. Ashford, do you have any comment on the charges?" "Preston, is it true you tried to kill a Navy SEAL?" "Will your father be arrested next?" Preston didn't answer. Couldn't answer. His lawyers had probably told him to stay silent, to let the legal process play out, to trust that money and connections would eventually make this all go away. But Marcus knew better. The video of Preston's arrest went viral within hours. It was shared alongside the original footage of Dorothy being humiliated, creating a narrative that was impossible to ignore. The man who had poured champagne on an elderly janitor was now facing justice. The system, for once, was working. Dorothy watched the footage with tears streaming down her face. "It's really happening," she whispered. "He's actually going to face consequences." "He's going to face more than consequences." Marcus's voice was quiet, but fierce. "He's going to face everything. Every person he hurt, every crime he covered up, every life he destroyed. It's all coming back." That afternoon, Marcus received a call he hadn't expected. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice. Familiar, but he couldn't place it. "This is Amanda Chen." "Amanda?" Marcus straightened. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay." Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. With something else. Something that sounded like relief. "I just wanted to thank you. I've been watching the news, seen everything fall apart for them, and I just—" She broke off, composed herself. "I've spent 3 years being afraid, 3 years hiding, 3 years letting them win. You didn't let them win. You survived. Because of you. Because you believed me when no one else would." A pause. "Derek called me this morning. He said he feels like a weight has been lifted. Like he can finally breathe again." Marcus thought about all the victims, the ones who had spoken up, and the ones who never would. The ones whose names he knew, and the countless others he would never meet. "It's not over yet," he said. "Leonard Ashford is still free. The company is still operating. There's more work to be done." "I know, but for the first time in years, I actually believe it's possible." Amanda's voice strengthened. "Whatever you need from me, more testimony, more evidence, anything. I'm ready. I'm not hiding anymore." Marcus smiled. It was small, tired, but real. "Thank you, Amanda. That means more than you know." He hung up and turned to find his mother watching him. "More allies?" Dorothy asked. "More than that." Marcus sat down beside her. "People who were silenced for years are finding their voices again. People who thought they were alone are realizing they're not." He shook his head. The Ashfords spent decades making people feel powerless. They never imagined what would happen when those people started connecting. Dorothy reached over and took his hand. "You did this. You made it happen." "We did it." Marcus squeezed her fingers. "You refused to take their money. You refused to stay silent. You stood up when everyone else would have bowed down." His voice thickened. "I just finished what you started." That night, as the sun set over the pine trees, Marcus's phone buzzed one last time. A text from Jake. "Breaking news coming in 5 minutes. You're going to want to see this." Marcus turned on the television, his heart pounding. The anchor's face was grave. "We're receiving reports that Leonard Ashford, CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals and patriarch of the Ashford family, has been taken into federal custody. Sources indicate he's facing multiple charges, including racketeering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit assault. This arrest comes just days after his son, Preston Ashford III, was arrested on similar charges." Marcus stared at the screen. Leonard Ashford, the man who had stood in his mother's parking lot and threatened to erase her from existence. The man who had built an empire on the backs of people he considered invisible. The man who believed money could buy anything, silence anyone, protect everything. He was finally going to face justice. Dorothy pressed her hand to her heart. "It's over," she breathed. "It's really over." But Marcus knew better. Justice was never that simple. There would be lawyers and trials and appeals. There would be attempts to discredit witnesses and undermine evidence. There would be people who defended the Ashfords no matter what, convinced that wealth and status made someone worthy of protection. Still, something fundamental had shifted. The truth was out. The pattern was exposed. The invisible had become visible. And that, Marcus knew, was something no amount of money could ever undo. The trial began 6 weeks later. Marcus sat in the front row of the courtroom, his mother beside him, Shadow waiting in the car with a volunteer from the Veterans Center who had offered to help. The room was packed. Journalists, photographers, curious citizens who wanted to witness history being made. Every seat was filled. Every eye was fixed on the door through which the defendants would enter. Dorothy's hands trembled in her lap. Marcus reached over and covered them with his own. "You don't have to be here," he said quietly. "No one would blame you if you waited outside." Dorothy shook her head. "I spent 8 years cleaning up after these people. I watched them treat the staff like furniture. I watched them laugh while we struggled." Her voice hardened. "I'm going to watch them answer for it." The door opened. Preston Ashford III walked in first, flanked by lawyers in suits that probably cost more than Dorothy's annual salary. He looked different than he had in the viral video. Thinner, paler, his arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like fear. His eyes swept the courtroom, and for one brief moment, they locked with Marcus's. Marcus didn't look away, didn't blink, just held that gaze until Preston's lawyers guided him to the defense table. Leonard Ashford entered next. The patriarch of the family moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step was a performance. He wore a dark suit and a neutral expression, the mask of a man who still believed he could talk his way out of anything. But Marcus noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the way his jaw clenched when the cameras flashed. The mighty were falling, and they knew it. The prosecutor, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Amanda, though the coincidence felt almost poetic, rose to deliver her opening statement. She was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and methodical, the kind of lawyer who built cases like architects built cathedrals. Every piece of evidence had been placed with precision. Every witness had been prepared with care. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is not simply about one incident at a country club. It's about a pattern of behavior that spans more than a decade, a pattern of assault, intimidation, obstruction, and corruption. It's about a family that believed their wealth and influence placed them above the law. And it's about the brave individuals who finally said, 'Enough.'" Marcus felt his mother's hand tighten around his. "You will hear testimony from victims who were silenced for years. You will see evidence that was buried, destroyed, and hidden from public view. And you will learn how deep this corruption runs, into our police departments, our courts, our very institutions of justice." Sarah Chen paused, her gaze sweeping the jury. "By the end of this trial, you will understand that the Ashford family didn't just break the law. They systematically dismantled the protections that keep ordinary people safe. And they did it because they believed no one would ever hold them accountable." She turned and pointed directly at Preston and Leonard. They were wrong. The first witness was Derek Santos. He walked to the stand with his chin high, the scar on his face visible to everyone in the courtroom. Marcus had spoken to him that morning, had seen the fear in his eyes, the doubt about whether he could actually go through with it. "You survived once," Marcus had told him. "You can survive this, too." Now Derek sat in the witness chair, facing the jury, and told his story. "I was 22 years old," Derek said, his voice steady. "Walking home from a friend's party. I heard the engine, but I didn't have time to react. The car hit me going at least 50 miles an hour." He touched the scar. "When I woke up in the hospital, I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know how bad my injuries were. All I knew was that there were men in suits standing around my bed, asking me to sign papers." "What kind of papers?" the prosecutor asked. "A settlement agreement and a non-disclosure agreement. They said if I signed, they would pay my medical bills. If I didn't," Derek swallowed, They said my life would become very difficult. Did they identify who was responsible for hitting you? Not directly, but I found out later. Preston Ashford. Derek looked at the defense table, his eyes burning. He was at a party that night. Witnesses said he was drinking heavily. He got behind the wheel, anyway. And what happened to the investigation? There was no investigation. The police ruled it inconclusive, despite multiple witnesses. The hospital records were sealed. It was like it never happened. Derek's voice cracked. Except I have to look at this scar every day. I have to live with the pain every day. It happened. It just didn't matter to anyone. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, trying to poke holes in Derek's story, suggesting he was motivated by money, implying his memory was unreliable. But Derek held firm. He answered every question with the same steady voice, the same unflinching honesty. When he stepped down from the stand, Marcus caught his eye and nodded once. Derek nodded back. One down, many more to go. Amanda Chen testified the next day. She entered the courtroom wearing a simple blue dress, her dark hair pulled back, her face composed. But Marcus could see the tremor in her hands, the slight hesitation in her step. 3 years of fear didn't disappear overnight. She sat in the witness chair and looked directly at Preston Ashford. He seemed charming at first, Amanda said. Attentive, generous. I didn't see the warning signs until it was too late. What warning signs? The prosecutor asked gently. The way he talked about people who worked for him. The way he treated waiters and drivers and housekeepers like they were beneath him, like they weren't even human. Amanda's voice trembled. I should have known then, but I was young. I thought I could change him. When did things become physical? Amanda closed her eyes briefly. About 3 months into the relationship. We had an argument about something stupid. I don't even remember what. He grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises. When I tried to leave, he blocked the door. She opened her eyes, tears glistening. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. Did you report the abuse? I tried. I went to the police station. I showed them the bruises. I gave them photos and recordings. Amanda's jaw tightened. The officer told me that Preston Ashford was a respected member of the community. He suggested that maybe I had misunderstood the situation. He said pressing charges would be inadvisable. And what happened after that? Men showed up at my parents' restaurant. They didn't threaten anyone directly. They just reminded my father how easy it would be for a small business to fail. How many regulations there were to follow. How one inspection could shut everything down. Amanda wiped her eyes. I dropped the complaint the next day. The defense attorney attacked her credibility, suggested she was a scorned ex-girlfriend seeking revenge, implied the recordings she had provided were doctored or taken out of context. But when those recordings were played in court, Preston's voice, unmistakable, bragging about paying off cops, threatening Amanda when she tried to leave. The jury's faces told the whole story. Marcus watched Preston during the playback. The heir to the Ashford empire sat motionless, his face pale, his lawyer's hand on his arm, as if physically holding him back from doing something stupid. Good. Let him feel what it's like to be powerless. Dorothy testified on the 4th day. Marcus had tried to prepare her, had spent hours going over the questions she might be asked, the attacks the defense might make, the emotions she might feel. But nothing could truly prepare someone to relive their worst moment in front of hundreds of strangers. She walked to the stand slowly, her silver hair pinned back, her best dress, the one she usually saved for church, pressed and clean. She looked older than her 62 years. She looked tired, but she also looked determined. Mrs. Cole, the prosecutor began, can you tell us what happened on the morning of July 15th? Dorothy took a breath. I was working, cleaning the poolside terrace at Ocean View Country Club. I had my cart with me, and I had Shadow, my son's dog. A retired military working dog that my son sent home to keep me company while he was deployed. What happened when you reached the terrace? A group of members were having brunch. Mr. Ashford, Preston, noticed me. He started making comments, asking who let the cleaning crew into the VIP area. His friends laughed. And then? Dorothy's voice shook. I tried to leave. I said I would move along, but he blocked my path. He saw Shadow and asked if I was bringing pets to work. I explained that Shadow was a military dog, that he belonged to my son. And then she stopped, swallowed. He grabbed a bottle of champagne and poured it over my head. The courtroom was silent. Marcus felt his hands clench at his sides. What did you do? I fell. The champagne was ice cold. It shocked me. I fell to my knees. And then his friend, Kyle Mercer, kicked my dog, kicked him in the ribs. Tears streamed down Dorothy's face. I threw myself over Shadow to protect him. I begged them to stop. I begged them. What happened next? The club manager, Vincent Marsh, came over. I thought he was going to help me. Instead, he grabbed my arm and dragged me away. He took my phone, told me I was causing a disturbance. Dorothy's voice hardened. Then he broke my phone and told me I was fired. Did anyone try to help you? No, no one. They all just watched or laughed or filmed it. The prosecutor let the silence stretch. Let the weight of those words sink into the jury's consciousness. Mrs. Cole, why are you here today? Why did you choose to testify? Dorothy lifted her chin. The tears were still falling, but her voice was steady now. Because I'm not invisible, she said. Because what they did to me matters. Because somewhere out there are other people like me. People who get treated like furniture, like garbage, like nothing. And they need to know that someone sees them. She looked directly at Preston Ashford. You thought I was nobody. You thought I didn't matter. But I raised a son who became a Navy SEAL. I survived a bad marriage and built a life with my own hands. I am somebody, and you don't get to erase me. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch his mother, the woman who had raised him, who had taught him everything he knew about strength and dignity and perseverance, stand before the world and refuse to be broken. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned Dorothy's memory, her motivations, her character. He implied she had provoked the incident, that she had exaggerated her injuries, that she was pursuing a vendetta against a wealthy family for financial gain. Dorothy answered every question with the same quiet dignity. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lose her composure. She simply told the truth, over and over, until even the defense attorney seemed to realize he was only making things worse. When she finally stepped down from the stand, Marcus was waiting at the edge of the aisle. "You did it, Mom," he whispered, pulling her into a hug. "You did it!" Dorothy clung to him, her body shaking with sobs she had held back during her entire testimony. "I was so scared, Marcus. I was so scared." "I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Marcus attended every session. He watched as witness after witness took the stand. Former employees of the club, victims of Preston's violence, business partners who had been pressured into silence, even a former Ashford family lawyer who had turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity. The picture that emerged was damning. The Ashfords hadn't just committed isolated crimes. They had built an entire system of corruption. Shell companies to hide payments, lawyers to intimidate witnesses, police officers on the payroll, judges who owed favors, an empire that existed not despite the law, but in defiance of it. Chief Holt's testimony was the turning point. The former police chief took the stand looking like a broken man. His uniform was gone, replaced by civilian clothes that seemed to hang on his frame. His voice was barely above a whisper. "How long have you been protecting the Ashford family?" the prosecutor asked. 12 years, since I became chief. And in that time, how many complaints were buried? How many investigations were shut down? Holt closed his eyes. I stopped counting after 30. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Why did you do it, Chief Holt? Why did you protect them for so long? Fear. The word came out like a confession. Leonard Ashford made it clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. My career, my pension, my family. Holt's voice cracked. I told myself I was protecting people by staying in my position, that if I left, someone worse would take over. But the truth is, I was just afraid. I was a coward. What changed? Holt looked at Marcus. Their eyes met across the courtroom. A Navy SEAL came to my office and told me I had a choice. Keep covering for them and go down with them, or start doing my job. Holt's voice steadied. He was right. I had a choice. I'd always had a choice. I just didn't want to see it. The closing arguments came on a Thursday afternoon. The prosecutor summarized the evidence, the testimony, the undeniable pattern of abuse and corruption. She reminded the jury of every victim: Derek Santos, Amanda Chen, Dorothy Cole, and the countless others whose names would never be known. The defense will tell you that the Ashfords are pillars of the community, Sarah Chen said, that they've donated millions to charity, that they've created jobs and supported local institutions, and all of that may be true. But it doesn't erase what they did. It doesn't bring back the years that Derek Santos lost. It doesn't heal the wounds that Amanda Chen carries. It doesn't give Dorothy Cole back her dignity. She turned to face the defendants one last time. Wealth is not a defense. Power is not a shield. And today, finally, justice will not be bought. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Marcus waited in the hallway with his mother, both of them too nervous to eat, too wired to sit still. Shadow had been brought in for emotional support, and the dog seemed to sense the tension, pressing close to Dorothy's legs, his brown eyes watchful. At 6:47 p.m., the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled within minutes. Marcus took his seat, Dorothy beside him, and watched as the jury filed back in. Their faces were unreadable. 12 strangers who held the fate of an empire in their hands. The judge asked the defendants to rise. Preston Ashford stood. His face was gray. His hands were shaking. Leonard Ashford stood beside him. The patriarch's mask had finally cracked. Marcus could see the fear beneath it, the desperation, the sudden realization that money couldn't save him. The jury foreman stood. On the charge of assault in the first degree against Preston Ashford III, how does the jury find? Guilty. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Dorothy grabbed Marcus's hand. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice against Preston Ashford III? Guilty. On the charge of racketeering against Leonard Ashford? Guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation against Leonard Ashford? Guilty. The verdicts continued. Guilty. 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 Each count, each charge, each crime. The jury had believed the evidence. They had believed the witnesses. They had believed the truth. Preston Ashford collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. Leonard Ashford stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Dorothy began to cry. Not the quiet tears she had shed on the witness stand, but deep, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Marcus held her, his own eyes burning, as 15 years of military discipline finally gave way to something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Relief. Joy. Vindication. Justice. The sentencing came 3 weeks later. Preston Ashford III received 12 years in federal prison. Kyle Mercer received 8. Vincent Marsh received 5. But it was Leonard Ashford's sentence that made headlines. 22 years. The judge cited the scope of the corruption, the number of victims, the systematic destruction of evidence, and the complete lack of remorse. "You believed you were above the law," the judge said, looking directly at Leonard. "You believed your money and your connections made you untouchable. You were wrong. Justice may be slow, Mr. Ashford, but it is never blind to those who abuse their power." Marcus watched as guards led Leonard away in handcuffs. The patriarch of the Ashford Empire walked with his head down, his shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the confident predator who had stood in Dorothy's parking lot and threatened to erase her from existence. The mighty had fallen, and they would not rise again. The months that followed brought changes Marcus hadn't anticipated. Dorothy received a settlement from the civil lawsuit, enough to pay off her debts and buy a small cottage near the beach. She donated the rest to a foundation for victims of workplace harassment. "I don't need their money," she told Marcus. "I needed them to see me." And they did. The Ocean View Country Club closed permanently. The property was purchased by a nonprofit that converted it into a community center, open to everyone regardless of income or status. Chief Holt retired with a reduced pension and spent his remaining years volunteering at a shelter for domestic abuse survivors. He never spoke publicly about the Ashfords again, but he wrote letters to every victim he had failed, apologizing for his cowardice. Derek Santos returned to college, funded by a scholarship created in his name. He graduated 2 years later with a degree in social work. Amanda Chen wrote a book about her experience. It became a bestseller. She used the proceeds to establish a legal fund for abuse victims who couldn't afford representation. And Marcus found something he hadn't known he was looking for. He left the Navy, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. 15 years of fighting other people's wars had taught him many things, but the most important lesson came from watching his mother stand in a courtroom and refuse to be invisible. There were battles worth fighting at home, too. He took a job coordinating veteran services for the county. Modest pay, honest work, an office that overlooked the same water where his mother used to walk him as a child, dreaming of journeys they would never take. One evening, 6 months after the trial, Marcus sat with Dorothy on the porch of her new cottage. Shadow lay between them, his muzzle gray now, his breathing slow and content. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Do you ever regret it?" Dorothy asked quietly. "Leaving the Navy? Giving up your career for this?" Marcus watched the waves roll in and out, the eternal rhythm that had comforted him since childhood. "I spent 15 years protecting strangers in places I couldn't pronounce," he said. "I did things I can't talk about, for reasons I'll never fully understand. And I don't regret any of it." He turned to look at his mother. "But I regret every day I wasn't here, every phone call I missed, every birthday I couldn't celebrate, every time you needed me and I was on the other side of the world." Dorothy's eyes glistened. "You were serving your country." "I was serving an idea, a flag, a mission." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "You're not an idea, Mom. You're the person who taught me what courage looks like, what dignity looks like, what love looks like." His voice thickened. "I should have been here, and now I am." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind a sky full of stars. "What happens now?" Dorothy asked. Marcus smiled. "Now we live. We wake up every morning and we live. Not because we have to, but because we get to." He squeezed her hand. "That's the whole point, isn't it? That's what we were fighting for." Shadow lifted his head, ears pricked toward some distant sound, then settled again with a contented sigh. The old warrior, finally at peace. Dorothy leaned her head against her son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. I've always been proud of you. But I'm prouder now than I've ever been." "Why?" "Because you could have handled this with violence. You could have used your training to hurt them the way they hurt me. But you didn't." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You chose truth over revenge, justice over anger. That's not the easy path. That's the right path." Marcus thought about the moment in the marina when Preston had taunted him. The moment when every instinct in his body had screamed for violence. He could have ended it there, could have shown Preston exactly what a Navy SEAL was capable of. But that would have made him no better than them. "You taught me that," he said softly. "You taught me that strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them. It's about standing up even when you're scared. It's about refusing to become the monster you're fighting against." Dorothy smiled. "I taught you well. You taught me everything." The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. The Ashford name faded from headlines, replaced by new scandals, new villains, new battles for justice. But the changes they had set in motion continued to ripple outward, touching lives they would never know. Laws were strengthened, protections were expanded. Victims found courage to speak because they had seen others speak first. And in a small cottage by the sea, a mother and her son built a life together. Not the life either of them had planned, but a life full of purpose and peace, and the quiet knowledge that they had stood for something that mattered. On the first anniversary of the verdict, Marcus took Dorothy to the spot where the Ocean View Country Club had once stood. The community center was thriving now. Children played on lawns that had once been reserved for the wealthy. Families gathered in spaces that had once excluded them. "This is what it was all for," Marcus said. "Not revenge, not punishment. This." Dorothy nodded, tears streaming down her face. "They tried to make me invisible. Instead, they made this possible." "You made this possible, Mom. You stood up when everyone else would have stayed silent. You refused to let them erase you." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "And because of that, because of you, other people learned they could stand up too." Shadow pressed against their legs, his tail wagging slowly, sensing the emotion in the air. Dorothy wiped her eyes and looked at her son, the boy who had once picked dandelions for her birthday, now a man who had dismantled an empire to protect her honor. "I love you, Marcus." "I love you too, Mom. Always have, always will." They stood there together, watching children laugh in spaces that had once been forbidden to people like them. The world didn't become perfect that day. It never would. There would always be Preston Ashfords and Leonard Ashfords, people who believed money entitled them to cruelty, who thought power meant they could treat others as less than human. But there would also always be Dorothy Coles, people who refused to bow, people who chose dignity over surrender, people who stood up even when standing up seemed impossible. And as long as those people existed, as long as they found the courage to speak and the strength to fight, justice would never be truly blind. Sometimes miracles don't come as thunder or fire from the sky. They come quietly, through a mother who refuses to bend, a son who refuses to turn away, and a truth that refuses to stay buried. God doesn't promise us a world without cruelty, but He promises that when we choose courage over fear, when we stand with the powerless against the powerful, when we shine light into the darkest corners, we are never truly alone. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, courage, and quiet miracles. And remember, even when you feel invisible, even when the world seems stacked against you, even when the powerful seem untouchable, your dignity is not theirs to take. You matter. You have always mattered. And somewhere, someone sees you. God bless you and your family with protection, peace, and strength. And may you never forget, even in the darkest moments, that light always finds a way through.